this on? Yeah. All right. Good evening. It's September 13th, the meeting for the Education Committee. This was postponed from September 3rd. And this is our first meeting in the 21-22 school year. Certainly, back to school has been a little bit different this year than we had anticipated. So we started the school year with staff and the leadership team and our PD was amazing. From what I've seen, the energy was, I don't know what I describe it, but it was really, really impressive. And from all I hear in the first day of school was fantastic. Sadly, things took a turn for the worse for this community, for the larger area, especially in the upper community, very hard. Some of our neighborhoods extremely hard, some others maybe not as hard, but there's so much water. But what has been amazing is how everybody got together and helped in big and small ways to make the worst of the team. Clearly, this is an ongoing project for all of us, especially with respect to schools. There's a lot of work to be done. I really want to say a big thank you to the staff, the leadership team, our staff who came out to help neighbors, friends, students, families all around. Also, the countless volunteers in the community is truly impressive. And yeah, we are moving forward. We're Upper Dublin strong, and we get out of this better than we have ever been. But it may take a little bit of time. But I'm very confident that it will go very well, and we have a lot of really strong and motivated people. So with that, I think I better get to the agenda for today. We have one presentation, and I'll get to that as soon as possible. Dr. Murphy, do you want to? No announcements? No. All right, so there are no announcements today. And we'll go to the all right. I'm not seeing that right now on the second meeting minutes. I'm not seeing them on the. Oh, they come later. That's why. I'm definitely out of practice here too. My apologies. All right, so that gets us right to the presentation. I think it's Dr. Yashel first. And yeah. Okay, so you want to do it. Okay. So are the members of the committee, have you seen the minutes from the June meeting? Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Moving forward. Yes. So then we'll move those forward to the legislative committee. Then it's time for the presentations. Or the presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Sherpier. The first part of our presentation tonight, I'd like to look at what we're calling our path to in-person instruction. And the purpose of this part of the presentation is to walk through the plans that we will be enacting over the next couple of weeks to resume in-person instruction at both the students and staff of Fort Washington Elementary as well as Upper Dublin High School. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is what we're calling our school alignment plan. So 4 elementary schools and 1 elementary experience. So we know that we needed to temporarily close Fort Washington Elementary. Fort Washington Elementary took in a lot of water during the tornado itself. And after some initial drying, when it rained again on Sunday, the 5th of September, we took in more water. That, coupled with the humidity, allowed for mold to grow in the parts of the building that were most significantly damaged, but there has been some mold growth in other parts of the building as a result, as a direct result of the water damage, because the water damage was not just confined to the first and second grade hallways where the roof was ripped off. We evaluated a number of options. We looked at another district at a closed elementary school. It was about a 4 to 6 week time frame to bring that building back to a place where we could have students in. We looked at other buildings here in the township, and really the most expedient way to get our students back to in-person instruction was to look at a scenario where we moved grade levels from Fort Washington and how our other buildings welcome them. So Jarretttown Elementary will be welcoming kindergarten and first graders from Fort Washington. This building, Maple Glen, will welcome second and third graders, and Thomas Fitzwater will welcome our fourth and fifth graders, and they've already welcomed our autism support, intensive learning support, classrooms and students. So some folks have asked me over the last couple of days how we're doing this, because do our buildings have all this extra space? They have this extra space out of necessity. So when you think about our buildings, reading specialists, special area teachers, special ed teachers, service providers, OT, PT, speech, many of them have full-size classrooms. And so temporarily what we're doing is relocating a number of those folks into smaller spaces that still allow us to comply with our health and safety plan. But that frees up real estate for us to move the classrooms and the students from Fort Washington to those buildings. I want to stress again that we do remain in compliance with our health and safety plan. So when we think about adding more students to buildings, we're elongating lunch schedules. We're looking at a push-in service delivery model for special area classes. So while there will be more students in buildings, there won't be more students in classrooms. We've held on to our class size targets. Our Fort Washington students will be instructed by their Fort Washington homeroom teachers. So the immediate change that kids will see and feel that they'll be in a new building, but we have a number of activities in each building planned to welcome students and staff. So we're confident that this plan will work. What I'm giving you tonight is my commitment. At Fort Washington, they have started to build, for lack of a better phrase, vapor locks, so that they, as they remediate a part of the building, there's a chance that we may be able to use them as part of Fort Washington in the next couple of weeks. So as soon as we can move students and staff back and do that in safe ways, we'll make sure that we alleviate some of the crowding in our other buildings and work our students back to Fort Washington. But we need to do that when it's safe, because we have to have air quality tests. We don't want to put kids in a building that we know as a direct result of this water damage has mold in it. So the work, it's not just cleanup. If those of you that are familiar with Fort Washington know that there's an incredible amount of wood casework, cabinetry, bookshelves, etc. Because all of that got wet, all of that has to be ripped out. So it's going to be a process, but it's going to be a process that the district will manage to make sure that replacement materials that are put into Fort Washington aren't done haphazardly. As I said before, our Fort Washington students will remain with their Fort Washington home teachers. Principals will be sharing revised schedules as well as the lunches. So the lunch, the start and end times of our lunches in each building will change a little bit to accommodate for the additional students. If students were receiving any type of special services such as special education, speech, occupational therapy, gifted support, etc. at Fort Washington, they will continue with those supports in their new locations. Transportation arrangements will be communicated no later than this Thursday. And we included that in our communication today. And then what we're saying is temporary arrangements to remain in effect until winter break. What we're trying to do is under promise and over deliver. If I said we hope that this only lasts until November, and then we had it elongated, we had a lot of very unhappy kids, staff, parents. So again, we will move kids back to Fort Washington if it's deemed that we can do so safely. But for planning purposes, if we need to, we have a plan in place that will remain in effect until winter break. And I will tell you that it was confirmed earlier today that we have teams of professionals packing up all of the teachers' belongings and students' belongings in each of the rooms. So throughout the remainder of this week, we will be doing moves internally to create space in each of our buildings. And then the Fort Washington Elementary School material will be coming over so that when teachers go to their new classroom, they will have what they need to be able to teach their students. And so we remain on target for next Tuesday to welcome our Fort Washington students back for in-person instruction at Jaredtown, Maple Neck, and Thomas. Upper Dublin High School, our students are going to remain virtual through Friday, February. So the September 24th. I know some of you are watching. If it winds up to be February 24th, there'll be all kinds of conspiracy theories. September 24th will be the last day of virtual instruction. So we are on track to bring kids back on the 27th. As a reminder, all of the air handlers, or the majority of the air handlers on the roof of Upper Dublin High School that are responsible for ventilation were damaged and or blown off the roof. The wait time to get the units that will be purchased is 20 to 30 weeks. Working with our teams of professionals, we were able to identify units that we could have on a temporary basis. So they're every bit as good as what will be there. We're just using them, we're renting them for a period of time, and that's going to allow us to get students back on the 27th. Those units are now in place. Our contractors have to build ductwork to make sure that we have appropriate ventilation in the building. The high school leadership team, advisors, coaches, etc., they're planning alternate locations for practices and events. So last year, because of COVID-19, we had sports, we had athletics, but some of our programs like choir, theater, etc., took a hit, not just in Upper Dublin, but in most districts, because there wasn't a place identified for those things to carry on. We tasked Dr. Callahan at Upper Dublin High School, as well as all of the advisors, to make sure that we are identifying spaces for those events to carry on. The good news is, once we're back on the 27th, everything resumes back in the building. And what I'll end with, on September 1st, we had canceled our afternoon and evening activities. We were scheduled to have this meeting that night, and I'm sure glad we did, because we would have had kids potentially in our swimming pool, in our weight room, in a number of locations. A number of us would have been at the high school in meetings. The morning after, on Thursday, September 2nd, if someone would have said that we would be able to get students at Fort Washington back in-person instruction next week, and the following week we would be reopening Upper Dublin High School, I would have said there was no way. So I really do want to thank all of our teams of professionals, including our contractors, our insurance company, my fellow administrators, the board, our teaching, professional staff, support staff, because it has been a Herculean effort to get in-person instruction back. And there's going to be some bumps in the road as we make these moves over the next couple of days to get students set up in the other elementary buildings. But I'm confident that by continuing to work together, we'll make sure that we not only make the best of the situation, but that we'll be sure to be easy with our kids as we do that. I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Penn.
All right, thank you. As always, we begin with 4 pillars of practice. And that's just there as a reminder for the administrators and the community that we do these together practice. Next slide. So again, we were excited to highlight on September 1st what was a wonderful summer of reimagining teaching and learning. Some of the summer highlights that we wanted to share was that we had over 250 teachers participating in professional reading over the summer. Over 60 teachers participated in a workshop this summer called Choose Your Own Learning Path Adventure. We had over 45 teachers participate in a curriculum camp with individual learning and content experts about accelerating learning, readjusting learning, and building on those lessons from this past year. We had almost 100 teachers working to redesign learning experiences. These were teacher-driven requests. So things that they learned from applying blended learning, feedback from students at the end of the year that they wanted to redesign units in ways that they've never done before. And then our highlight always is welcoming our inductees, our new teachers to the nest. We found that by providing choice and flexibility for our staff, they are seeing the value in providing choice and flexibility for our students. We've had an increase in participation, active engagement. We're continuing to get book requests from staff members. We've already had 40 of those books. These are the 10 books that our teachers have access to over the summer, ranging from blended learning, ranging from shifting student voice to the front of the classroom, strive for happiness, how we can refocus our thoughts and our thinking. Culturize is about how we build a school culture, and innovate inside the box is about how we bring innovation into what we do every day. So we've had ed assistants, principals, teachers, counselors, you name it, reading and exploring these books, and we've been really excited. In November, we'll be centering a lot of our professional learning about what we are seeing teachers can apply from this learning and sharing that with their colleagues. So the focus, if you've seen any of the presentations that I've offered over the past, this is year 3 now, for our professional learning week, there's always some sort of a theme or a heading for the day. And when the team got together to think about what our focus would be in August for teachers, it was reimagining learning to empower all students. That's something that we've learned over the past year. The value of that is something that we were working towards in March 2020. And that phrase really spoke to us as the leadership team. There's a book called Disruptive Thinking in Our Classrooms, and in that, Eric Schenger says, don't prepare learners for something, prepare them for anything. Don't prepare learners for something, prepare them for anything. The idea of future-proofing learning. So when we shut down in March of 2020, people weren't sure what to do in that way. School was forever changed in that moment. And so when we think about future-proofing, I think that's a new way for us to understand what we want to hold on to and what we need to reimagine. And, silver lining of the last few weeks in connection with what Dr. Yanni said, with our ability to move to virtual and come back pretty quickly, is that we know how to do that. It may not be the preferred method, but we had a plan that we were able to enact pretty quickly. And so as we continue to maximize that to future-proof our schools. Our teachers, as part of the closure of professional learning, had 3 questions that they completed in their survey. The first question was, what is your next step in your journey toward reimagining learning? The second question, what support do you need for that next step? And the third question was, how will you realize success in this next step? And when we think about the power of yet, which is a concept in our elementary schools, we think about how we reimagine conferences and progress reports. It's those kind of reflective next steps. So I don't know it yet, but what will my next step be? And our teachers are, in a variety of places, but they're all really excited to learn and to continue taking that next step. So I wanted to share just kind of a preview of where we are looking for Ed Committee focus areas for the year and where our work is in the Office of Teaching and Learning. We're continuing to work through blended learning and student voice as we reimagine learning to empower all students. What that looks like at the high school level, which will be sharing more about in the coming weeks is the master schedule, course revisions, student-teacher collaboration. So those are three big ideas that came out. Student-teacher collaboration being the value of that time built into the day for students to have access to collaborate with their teachers. The need for some courses to adapt and change. The need for courses to be offered differently, whether that means full year or semester, and that master schedule that we've been discussing. For the middle school, it's easy to get really focused. We've been talking as a team the last few days that, we're very focused on work in the high school, but we still have 4 other schools that are in person and doing some amazing things. And so it's also important we remember in a year we'll be opening San Diego Middle School. And so we want to talk through more with you all about our community, about our vision for middle school education, what that looks like, what we value, so that when we open the doors, we're opening the school and providing the education that we're all proud of. And that's an opportunity for us to develop that school community as well. We're continuing to build those relationships similar to the student-teacher collaboration at the middle level with ARP and some other opportunities for students to engage with the community. And then at the elementary level, we do have our focus with reading and writing and math, as always, where we're looking at those programs and our social and emotional program lined up that we heard more about maybe a meeting or 2 ago. We'll be sharing more about that in the course of the year as those lessons come together. K-12 writing framework is ongoing part of this work, and having Sabrina Vandergrift with us as the supervisor of arts and humanities will be really establishing that work and helping us realize the potential of that framework over the course of the year. So that was all for the updates.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman and Dr. Yanni, for the presentation. I would like to ask members of the committee any questions. I know it wasn't specified, Mr. Hoffman. As you are taking this path to reimagining schooling, and I know we looked a lot at home practice homework as a concept last year. Do you have thoughts on the direction that's taking?
Yes, so that's a popular teacher question as well. And the question as it was framed early this summer in fall was, is homework still banned? And there was never a ban on homework, so those are no questions. Even if the parents are listening in, don't believe that when you heard that. Where we were at last August and September was that we were learning at home. And so for teachers, it was important for us to think about what that practice outside of the daily class looks like. And so coming back to the why, so what do I want to know more about from my students, and why do I need them to practice more? But often the very traditional, here's the concept in math that I teach today, now go home and do 40 problems. All the odd problems we always go through for the ones with the answers in the back of the book when I was in school. You either knew them or you didn't. And that lesson was either frustrating or frustrating on either side. And so we've been spending a lot of time talking with our teachers about what it is we believe and what it is that we need. Through that process, we're going to develop some best practices that we want to establish and kind of bring around. We don't ever want to say that every kid needs 40 minutes of X. We want to make sure that kids are likely not having 120 minutes of X. But if we believe that students should be reading outside of school for practice and to increase their rigor, that's absolutely something that we should be participating in. So it's definitely something that we've been talking through, and when you reimagine it, what is it that you want students to do? Traditional practice problems can happen during class, and we can apply something well beyond when we do class.
Great.
Yeah, AJ, Julian, I'm curious, I'd like to hear more about grading levels and that.
So yes, that was K-12. We have teachers from every building and almost every content area. So they have a traditional, HA's known for his conference, so we'd be upset when you think traditional conference. But there were keynotes and larger sessions about how do we accelerate learning, shifting that on so that we talk about it's not learning loss, but unfinished learning. So it's focusing on what we do in those moments. But the best part, I think, of the curriculum that I've heard from teachers is they were paired up with content experts in their disciplines or about their levels. And so our elementary teachers were able to work with elementary teachers who were embodying, incorporating a range of classroom. Our entire seventh grade social studies team got together and they got to work with social studies middle school expert and really rethinking how do I provide enrichment for my students in the classroom as opposed to outside of the classroom. How do I adapt kind of pathways and our playlist that we talked about. And so it was a time for us to share some of our own frameworks, get feedback, to share some lessons, to get some ideas, to take some lessons that have worked in other districts. There was a lot of that. I know I'm going to say that about that.
That's great, thank you.
I'm certainly witnessing a lot of enthusiasm by teachers, and I believe teachers very much in the role of learners, and that experience up there when we have virtual work over the summer, I think has expanded it, and I'm excited to see what the product of that is. Dr. Young, in your presentation about Fort Washington and Dublin, about the high school, can you say a little bit about transportation? Because I think that's something that parents are interested in. It's perhaps not identified in the community, but I mean.
Sure. So Mr. Lettman is working with Chris Robbins, our director of transportation, finalizing some routes. We have two things to consider. First, we have students that ride the bus to Fort Washington that will need to be transported to other buildings. And then we also have the students that are within the walking zone. Right now for Fort Washington, those students will also need to be transported as well. The reason we haven't released those plans just yet is we want to run the scenarios and make sure that we have everything as tight as possible. And by tight, I don't mean tight on time, I mean correct, to make sure that we're providing as much service as possible. So, as I said in my presentation, that information will be released to parents, guardians, families on Thursday, no later than Thursday. It may come out earlier than Thursday.
Great, thank you. All right, then again, many thanks for all the hard work that has been put into planning of this year, and we look forward to hearing reports on the things you reviewed. So let's go to item number 6, the AP biology test.
Yes, I'm asking to approve the purchase of the AP biology textbook and the resources. There are virtual and print books, as well as AP exam materials that go with that collection. Updated resources needed to be in compliance with the AP course audit. We were noted on that last year and worked through that process. AP will give you, College Board will give you a list of appropriate texts that you can choose from, and our teachers will go through those texts and came to the public.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I was a little curious about the numbers. You're looking at 60, 40, and 20. Can you explain that?
Yes, it's just, it's again, as we reimagine learning, we don't distribute class depth of textbooks the same way that we have when we were in school. must be approved by College Board, needs to follow the units of study. Any one of the mandatory texts, that's where they went. The students over the years have been about 1/3 to 2/3. 2/3 preferring the print text in class, and 1/3 preferring to use that resource electronically. It's really the difference of picking a book out of the library or downloading it. It's just the preference of students. There is flexibility within there. The 60 is the workbook that goes with it, and those workbooks are not written in, but just used as classroom text as well.
Can we move this, we do know which move this to the legislature? No. All right. Do that. And then item B is Dr. Bedwell's consulting arrangement.
So the board will remember 2 years ago, before the pandemic hit, we contracted with the Center for Educational Leadership out of the University of Washington. And the express purpose of that was to increase the collective efficacy of our leadership team, our building principals, assistant principals, principal office leaders, as well as our curriculum supervisors. Through that process, we met Dr. Betty Webb. Dr. Webb had been an associate superintendent in Minnesota for years, and now she's an independent contractor with the Center for Educational Leadership. Last year, we were poised to do the work that you see on the contract before you tonight. That, we paused on that because obviously with the pandemic and the inability of having large-scale meetings, we decided to punt that to this year. So what you will see is a contract that we are going to be working directly with Dr. Webb. We got permission from the Center for Educational Leadership to work directly with Dr. Webb, and that comes as a substantial savings to the district. So the last time we engaged with Sal, it was $40,000 for 6 days with 15 administrators. This will impact 24 administrators, over 300 teachers, and our entire student body. But the focus is on supervision and evaluation, providing feedback to teachers, and also aligning with our strategic goals of continuous improvement. There are new processes and parameters in Pennsylvania that we have to align to this year with Act 13 for educator effectiveness. So Dr. Webb will be working with us on that as well. The funding for this contract comes from Title II, which is federal funding. And Title II, you can't spend Title II on just anything. You have to spend it on things that fit this parameter. So improve the quality and effectiveness of principals and other leaders and teachers to improve student achievement. Increase student achievement with state standards, improve quality of instructional leaders, increase numbers of effective teachers and principals in improving student achievement, and provide low-income students with access to the highest quality teachers and leaders possible. So these funds, when we crafted our budget for this year, we get Title II as a revenue item, and then our contract with Dr. Webb, at that time I thought it was going to be a contract itself, but the contract with Dr. Webb is included in our budget. You'll see that she's going to be with us a total of 20 days. Some of those are virtual. Some of the things in there, like travel, and some of the costs may actually be lower. Those are not to exceed numbers. So I anticipate after having conversations with Dr. Webb, a number of those costs will be less than what you see there reflected. So we'll make sure with the motion, if this is moved forward to the legislative meeting, the motion will be not to exceed those figures.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yami. Any questions?
I think you were just alluding to it, Dr. Yami. If Dr. Webb's travel was prevented due to COVID, or is that what you're talking about in terms of maybe virtual would be required?
She has some built-in coaching time that's going to be virtual. But if for whatever reason, we communicated to her that if her travel was prevented because of COVID, we would continue the contract at another time.
The Dr. Davis.
I guess my question is that since this is a follow-up to some of the work that's already gone on, what's the process for bringing new administrators that we hired into the process so that they can, catch up quickly and then continue with the work?
So that work has been done. So as we hire new administrators, and there were a number of administrators that were part of our team when we did this work before that were not part of that group because it was a small group. We brought those folks up to speed. This is really going to be laying the groundwork and the framework for better evaluations. So not only is this going to touch the instructional administrators in the district, it's also going to affect the non-instructional members such as Mr. Leckman, Ms. Kitten, folks that are outside the realm of teaching and learning. When I look at this, and I look at some of the other programs or the other processes that districts have used, there was something called Leadership Dynamics that the district did, I think 7 or 8 years ago, the University of Penn. That never really took off the way it was intended to take off. It was roughly the same amount of money. When I look at who is engaged with CEL in our area, Park Valley has engaged, as has Trinidad Easttown, Radnor, Downingtown's looking into it. And so what I'm most excited about with this work is I think we've built and are continuing to build a highly effective leadership team, and this is going to sort of round out that experience. After we engaged with Dr. Webb this time, I'm not saying we're never going to engage with her again, but it won't be to this extent. So this really brings our leadership team to the highest level of actually being trained and developed to do the work that each of us need to do on a daily basis.
Great, thank you, Dr. Yanni, and I think this ultimately is going to benefit all students. That's with clear guidelines and plans for administrators that will benefit teachers and students. So it seems to be a very good investment for the district. So committee members, we move on to the legislative. Right? Thank you. We will do that. I think that gets us to item 7, community input. I'm going to ask people in the audience if you want to make a comment to address the board. Please say your name and where you reside in the district. We have also received 3 written comments. I see one of the writers is present, so do you want me to read it? Or? Yeah. Okay. All right. So please, to the podium if you want to speak.
Sorry about that. I wasn't sure if I was going to be here, so I could stuff that in, and he answered a lot of my questions. My name is Stein, and I'm from Ambler. The $50,000 number shocks me. The $11,000 travel shocks me. Like there's nobody else in this country that can do that. And I guess the timing of it bothers me in the sense that these kids have been virtual for 18 months. They're now virtual and going through this devastation, this tornado. An entire elementary school is going to be jammed into other buildings. The high school, as my junior says to me, I haven't had a normal high school year yet, which is devastating to hear. I just feel like educating our admin, maybe this isn't the right time either, and we can use resources to help our children. You did mention that might help 300 kids or whatever, but I don't know how that's affecting the kids. I think we need more immediate impactful things for them, whether that's mental health help or catching them up because they've been virtual for so long. I know they're behind. I absolutely know they are. Another concern I have is with the tornado, we're raising a ton of money to PTAs, PTOs, UDEA, UDAF, etc. And I'm just wondering if they spend that money only on the children in the buildings, which are teachers, which is what they're supposed to do. How does that affect our insurance reimbursements? Because I think a lot of stuff, I mean, people are desperate to help in any way they can, and they want immediate impactful things to go to teachers and students to get back to normal as much as possible. But I worry that really a lot of that money should be reimbursed by our insurance. I'm just wondering how we are going to account for all of that. And then I was wondering if Washington, even though they're going to be displaced for a period of time, are they able to come do some thinking outside the box, getting together as a Fort Washington community for some of their traditions, like a Halloween parade, for example, outside, you know, at the Lagash Field or something. I'm hoping that that is the case. I have a couple other questions that are just like from community members, and it's rough and raw, and it's not necessarily exactly how I would put it, but I'm just gonna read it. I've been asked by many why this meeting couldn't have been rescheduled, knowing that there's a community-wide event being held in the fire department to honor their heroic service during and after IDA. I want to know why they're holding a meeting at 6 o'clock, which I have been mentioning for years, how this is so difficult for all of us that are in a million different areas at like 5:30, 6 o'clock with our children. When is it possible to make that time? I want to know why they aren't offering this meeting in person and in Zoom. We know for a fact that more participation occurred when this meetings were on Zoom. And again, 6 o'clock is so difficult for so many people to get to that have children in multiple activities, which we want them to be in. We also want to participate in this process of being involved with our community and our school board. And the last question, it seems like the intent of the school board is to have as many, you would think that the intent of the school board is to have as many people attend and participate as much as possible, and it doesn't seem that's the case. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, everybody. My name is Stein. I'm from Fort Washington. I just wanted to say first, thank you to Dr. Yanni. I applaud your outside-the-box thinking and the swiftness in which you've gotten these kids back on track with the plan to get them back to school. We all know how crucial in-person learning is, and I know that my kids are thrilled to be getting back faster than they had thought, so I really thank you for that. I know the theme here tonight is Reimagining Learning, and I thought it kind of goes with what some of the comments that I had as well. I think it's fantastic that educators and administrators are constantly thinking of how we can reimagine learning and use the Chromebooks and, you know, what does the real life, everyday learning look like in our elementary schools and middle schools. And I just had a little bit of wondering, do we also reimagine virtual learning? As we see, we are at virtual learning way faster than any of us thought we would be. And I think that most of us, especially parents of kids, know that the virtual platform that we currently have, and we are currently using right now because we had to, is not great. And it's not for lack of trying, and it's not for lack of teachers doing everything they can. This is no disrespect, but I just think, could we reimagine what the virtual day looks like? Maybe it's asynchronous, maybe it is a flipped classroom approach. Our classrooms are not outfitted for virtual learning, so could a teacher videotape herself and then we would play it later? This would work for the flexibility of the families, as well as for the flexibility of some of the students. I know my son got up at 5:30 a.m. today to go to practice, and he couldn't stay awake hardly for his classes, and I just thought, wow, if we have to be virtual, wouldn't it be great if he could watch his classes maybe later, or, you know, family had to go to work, and they had, you can see where I'm going with this, but I just think, I hate virtual learning, and I realize it might be part of our next year, and I beg you to reimagine what that could look like too, if we are indeed forced to return to it. Also, if we are not, which I'm hoping, I'm asking that maybe we could reimagine some of the high school programs we have in place now such as community study. I have a son in the class of 2022, and I'm a graduate in the class of 2019. Our college path and process is completely different, as you can imagine. Community study was awesome. Now it's not, because a lot of kids can't go. There aren't buildings for them to go into. There aren't schools for them to go into, but it's a great thing for the seniors. The timing is great. They have senioritis. It gets them out to do something that they might find helps them along their college path. And I just ask, could we reimagine, not take away, but reimagine what the community study looks like, because I think it is such a vital and a great program that we offer at the high school, but the current way it's set up, I think is a waste, and I would hope that maybe we could look at that. And I had one more note. I know the last education meeting, Dr. Yanni talked about setting up some sort of teams of students, pulling them together. I'm hoping that's still happening as well. And if there's any way possible, hoping that there is maybe a career fair or something, career day for the high school students. I really see it, and I talk to a lot of students. They're really lost right now. I think last year they kind of put everything on hold, and time's running out, college apps are due. And I also know tonight was supposed to be the college planning night, and I'm wondering if that's gonna be rescheduled too, because college planning looks so different. Again, like I've been through the process once, but now it's going to look totally different with my next son, and it was really helpful, the college planning that we had last time. So I know I'm out of time, I know that was a lot, but thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the audience?
Hi, I'm Caitlin Johnson, and I live in Antler. My kids go to Fort Washington. And the reason I came today was to ask if we on Zoom. I got stuck in the traffic in Fort Washington. I didn't know the building, so I was walking around, and I realized if this was on Zoom, I would have the chance to just look into the night and to be a part of this. And I feel like we have come so far in technology, I'm just not really sure why we can't continue with something that wasn't working. Just because there's so many families that have activities or just have small kids, and they really want to be a part of this community, and there's so much going on. Tornadoes, and I'm gonna have two kids going to two different elementary schools, and they've never been on a bus before. Am I driving there? Is my husband driving there? Like, there's so many things that are going on right now that's just one thing that can make their lives like this much easier. So that was one. Thank you.
Thank you. See no other people stepping up, I will lead the two first one is from the Department of Treasure. Says that 11 Marion students have both virtual and face-to-face back to school night. I'm wondering why Upper Dublin is making it virtual, but you can still make it work in person with some accommodations. Other comment was from Bill Brown and Treasure. My wife and I are very appreciative of all the efforts that have been taken to get the high school students back into the classroom as quickly as possible. We also appreciate the rehearsal spaces that have been made available for the performing arts. We are disappointed to see that all back to school nights will be virtual this year. We can understand the virtual option for perhaps part of the evening to assist families that were impacted by IDA, but precluding all parents from seeing their child's classrooms and teachers for a second consecutive year seems unnecessary. We would appreciate knowing the factors that led to this decision. We add the comment that if social distancing is a concern, then attendance would be limited to one masked parent per child, which would mimic the daily attendance in the classrooms and buildings. We do note that the exclusion of parents from student activities, concerts, performances, etc. will not continue this year. The students need the opportunity to perform to live audiences, and the parents and community need the opportunity to share in these events in person with the students. And that is the end of community input. I'll close that, and I'm going to ask the administration to comment and the board members.
I'll start, Mrs. Shortman, if that's okay. The there is a tremendous amount of fundraising going on right now. One of the things that we're working on is a one-page flyer that shows what different groups are fundraising for, so that folks in the community know where they could direct their donations and other things, financial and otherwise. The insurance company has been in both Fort Washington and the high school. And so what we had to do was parse out what was district bought materials and what were materials that were not district bought, whether they were from grants, whether they were from the PTO, whether they were teachers' personal effects or not. We had to do that because the reimbursement from the insurance company really is on district purchased items, and then there's another pot of money that will be dispersed for everything else. But that other pot, that other piece of everything else, is not reimbursed at a great rate because it wasn't paid for by the district. And if you go into any of our elementary classrooms as an example, there are a number of things in those classrooms that came from UDSD, came from the PTO, came from any number of outside agencies. So it is painstaking work, and I really thank Andy Lehman for his work directly with the insurance company, because it literally meant standing in a classroom, going through what was being salvaged, what was not being salvaged, and saying, yes, that was paid for with district funds, or no, that wasn't. There was a question about for us to do some traditional things. So I think the Halloween parade that was mentioned is a really good example. One of the things that we'll be working to do is to provide for some of those activities some alternate arrangements during those days, so kids don't lose the things that are really important to them. The Halloween parade, I mean, I even like the way Mr. Mack DJs the Halloween parade. So, I mean, that alone is a highlight of the year, right? So, we'll let DJ Mack continue with that. So, look for information about that. Why there was a question, so why wasn't this meeting rescheduled? Why at 6 p.m.? Why not on Zoom? I'll be honest with you, I only learned today that there was a first responder meeting, so I wasn't aware of it. Maybe that's because I'm running in a bunch of different directions. It's not an excuse, but I didn't know that meeting was today. I think we were, the board was clear, although we can always revisit if we want to add a Zoom component to our meetings, but that would be at the pleasure of the board. I really do think we need to reimagine our virtual learning. So when we think about reimagining our learning during the school day for in-person instruction, some of the things that are really difficult is what school looks like today is not what it looked like even 5 years ago. Last year, with virtual learning, some districts outfitted classrooms with cameras, etc. We're going to continue to look to see what that virtual experience looks like. Our goal is not to have a one-size-fits-all. So tonight we heard a request for more asynchronous time. I can tell you over the weekend I got emails saying that there wasn't enough synchronous time. So trying to find that balance of what's good for kids. So you'll continue to hear more about that as we reimagine it. Community study. I think community study does need to be reimagined. I think one of the things that I love about our district is that we're steeped in tradition. One of the things that really frustrates me about our district is that we're steeped in tradition. So it's really hard sometimes when we want to change our tradition. Despite being a nice guy myself, I was told my first whole year here by staff that I was trying to make the district feel corporate. And I wasn't trying to make the district feel corporate, I was trying to put a process in place where there was a process, right? And that's not a knock against the district. When someone comes in with a different set of eyes, you look and you say, oh, maybe we can improve some efficiency here, maybe we can do X, Y, and Z. So I think it takes longer to change those types of things in upper level because everyone wants to hold on to whatever it was, whether it's community study or the planetarium or Robbins Park or X, Y, and Z, everyone wants to hold on to those. So while we're going to reimagine those things, we also need the flexibility with the community and the staff to, trust us, because maybe we do know what we're talking about as we try to pivot and do some of those things. The students, or the superintendent advisory team, that's only being delayed because we haven't really been in school yet. There'll be information in the next 2 weeks going out about that. Our meetings will actually start in October. And as a reminder, those meetings are going to be groups of students that are reflective of our greater student body so that we can hear about the student experience. I know there is some career fair discussion going on. That actually falls under our college and career readiness, our 339 information. So look out for more information there. And I have sent Mr. Schultz, our high school principal, I believe the college planning night is either tonight or tomorrow night, and we'll make sure that that gets scheduled one way or the other. And finally, one of the pre-read comments tonight, there was something about the exclusion of parents. And I'm gonna go on my soapbox a little bit here, and we'll have to agree to disagree about what we're calling exclusion of parents. Our health and safety plan this year calls for no visitors or volunteers during the day unless we are in low transmission of COVID-19. There is absolutely one reason for that. We want to do everything we can do to make sure that we don't disrupt in-person learning. So if anyone wants to be mad at the fact that we're not having visitors and volunteers, you can direct your anger at me, because that's really where it is. We're not trying to exclude parents. We really don't want to do anything that's going to throw us back into, having to shut a whole grade level down, or a whole building down, or God forbid, the whole district down. I think our leadership team has been incredibly transparent, not just with what we did around the tornado, but if you think we did those remember the Touch Base Tuesdays that we did last year? Remember those Touch Base Tuesday? Where some folks told me that the information was the same every week, and it's like, yes, it was the same many weeks because the information wasn't changing. So as soon as we can, get to a point where we can remain in compliance with our health and safety plan, we can get more folks in, we're absolutely going to do that. I referenced at our last meeting that there was a rumor going around town that we weren't going to have concerts and we weren't going to have shows this year. I'm not really sure where those rumors started, because those rumors are not true. And one of the things that I've said to our staff, and I said, I think it was either in my screencastify or one of the communications, until you hear official word from the district about anything, you should just assume what you're hearing is conjecture. There's no appetite to not have things like choir this year and not have theater. If you remember a year ago, we were dealing with CDC recommendations, and I know they're not law, but they're recommendations, where they were saying don't have kids sing in a room unless you can air it out for 30 minutes afterwards. Well, I'm not sure how any school in America does that. So really, unless you hear official word from the district, from the horse's mouth here, you should assume that a lot of those things are just conjecture. I think I covered just about everything that's a short here.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment?
The communication from Mr. Schultz that went out on September 9th has the college career evening for families. It's tomorrow evening from 7 to 8. It's a virtual meeting, so you can check out the information. This is Ward when Mr. Schultz has that information.
You're in the green, so you get to go first. Okay, thank you. Just addressing the concept around continuing professional development for the administration. My perspective is that, yes, we are going through a very difficult time. We also need to continue to provide the utmost and best possible supports to our administrators, who are, I don't even know how some days, being faced with continually new and different challenges. And I believe what Dr. Yanni had shared about the funding for that is coming from Title II federal funding, not out of our budget. And we can't stop the initiatives around teaching and learning and around professional development, because our kids deserve the most up-to-date critical thinking that they're getting from a team that has already benefited from part of the training. So I don't want to see us stall and stagnate in that. So that's my personal rationale for supporting the programming that we're talking about today. And that's just that piece.
So some folks, not here, but when I was at a township meeting on the pop-up meeting on Friday, said, I can't believe you're going ahead with that contract when you're not doing anything for the mental health of students. So let me go on the record by saying we've added a third social worker. We have implemented this year, we're implementing Mind Up. We also have at our disposal the entire mental health team from the MCIU that they will be with us for as long as we need. One of the things we're doing this year as part of my superintendent goals is to really analyze the effectiveness of our student services department and the delivery that delivery of services that we are providing there. What that means with number of counselors, what that means with do we need more social workers, what does that mean for social emotional programming, what does all of that mean? So I want to be very clear with folks that it's not like we're doing this contract and work with Dr. Webb and we're not doing those other things. We're doing both. We're doing both. And you'll see whether it's this legislative meeting coming up or the October, when I do a presentation on my goals, you'll see the study that I just mentioned, because we really do have to get in and look at, where are we understaffed, where are we overstaffed, and are we providing the right types of service delivery for the kids and the needs that they're bringing to school.
Thank you. And Mr. Sorona?
Just a couple of quick things. One is on the conflict with the event happening at the firehouse. I think we'd all love to get there if we can. This meeting was already rescheduled once. It was originally supposed to be on tornado night. I'm personally rather glad it was rescheduled. After that meeting was then created and then rescheduled twice. I mean, at some point, you're just gonna, you can't satisfy everything. So, yeah, it's unfortunate there's a conflict, but it was never realistic. We weren't going to reschedule it yet again to avoid that. The work of the governing the school district is too important. When Dr. Yanni was talking about the comment about the exclusion of parents, he said, I'm paraphrasing, we have to do everything we can to keep schools open. And I very strenuously agree. We all must do everything we can. A number of things in the health and safety plan are tied to the level of community spread. If we want these kinds of things to be able to happen, we have to minimize community spread. We all have to minimize community spread as much as possible. And a number of people have commented that wouldn't it be great if we could have Zoom meetings, there was great participation. I'll go on record with saying I agree. The Zoom meetings for the purpose of governing the school board, for the effectiveness of school board business, conducting school board meetings, I thought the Zoom meetings were very effective. At least as effective as this, it was nice to be able to see everyone instead of citing along a long table. And we absolutely had fantastic participation. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the participation from the community was extremely high, higher than I've ever been in my time on the board for sure. So I'll say I think we should go back to Zoom meetings, only Zoom meetings, but not have a meeting like this at a long table and Zoom people. I think in order to minimize community spread, at least as long as we're in high transmission, we should consider going back to fully Zoom meetings for all of us.
Any other comments? Dr. Davis?
I'd just like to make a comment about Zoom and in-person. I would agree that we had great participation with our Zoom meetings, but I also think it's important for us to be in person. While our kids are coming into school, I think we can, have these meetings in person. I think it's nice to be able to look out and see faces. I think we have to, have some further discussion around Zoom. Part of our belief was that because we do live stream all of our meetings, that people would be able to participate that way. But we certainly are not getting the participation through live stream that we had through our Zoom meetings. So it is something that the board will need to discuss along with our administration and make some decisions as we sort of settle into the school year with all the changes that are going on. Part of it was that we don't need change after change after change from month to month to try to settle in a little bit. So I would like us to, continue what we're doing right now until we can come up with a decision, see what's going on. With, the virus and, see where we're going to go so that if we are going to make any changes, we can stay with that for a little while. I think it's even harder when our families don't know what we're doing from meeting to meeting, and we do have 3 meetings, per month. So, when we put out that schedule, I think we need to stick with it for a little bit, but it is something I think the board needs to, consider, because we are not getting the kind of participation that we really enjoyed, all of last year.
Any other? Yeah, I may.
Dr. Young, you mentioned that the MCIU is going to be working with us for mental health and also the extra social worker. Can you elaborate a little? How will parents access that program?
Sure, I'll start and then I'll ask Dr. Perez to join in. The social worker, just like we do at middle school and high school, will have a caseload. It might not be as defined a caseload as it is in secondary. Our school staff will be referring students to the social worker. Parents will be also able to request the services of the social worker. And Dr. Perez, I believe the MCIU, the mental health services, are at our disposal at our request, correct?
Correct. So the mental health resources from the MCIU are available to us on an as-needed basis. So if we see an increased level of need, we can call them and they will send a number of folks to our building. In terms of the social worker, especially at the elementary level, which is this year, one of the things that we talked about is to really monitor many of our Fort Washington students as they're coming back, they can have experienced this, and to be able to triage some services that way with our social worker. So it was serendipity that we have the social worker with us starting this year that we can do that.
Anybody else? I have a quick question about the Dr. Webb assignment. It was mentioned that I think 300 kids in I thought this was population.
If I said students, that was a misstatement of mine. I should have said 300 professional staff, because they'll benefit from the work that we administrators do.
Thank you. I think all right, then we are at item number 8, to say that the next meeting for the education committee will be on Wednesday, October 6th at 6 p.m., likely in this location, I think. And then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for your attendance. Take a 5-minute break prior to the policy committee meeting.
Exactly. But after I said it, I was like, crap. How did I get this number?
How's the feed?
Seems good. Who's speaking? Some people speak very low, some people. Dr. Young speaks like that. Dr. Davis came out with a buzz.
I think it's definitely the bass.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Up close.
Some of it's got to be over. Here's the biggest problem with the new projects. It's the weird part that we're gathering up and doing it doesn't show up. Obviously, so ideally, so if we want to do a network job, it works.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fairly brief agenda if we could come back. I gave up my gavel to Darlene and I do not want these proverbial gavels are Dr. Davis. All right, if I could call tonight's policy committee meeting of the Dublin School District Board of School Directors to order. It is Monday, September 13th, and it is now 7:13 p.m. Here in the cafeteria at Maple Glen Elementary School. Tonight, Dr. Yanni, are there any announcements or communications?
There are none.
All right, thank you so much. So this evening we have 4 second readings, 4 policy second readings. These were discussed last month initially and also at the legislative committee meeting. So if we could begin with 006 meetings, Dr. Young.
Thank you. So looking at 006, this is a board operating guideline that we have on the agenda tonight for second reading. After I direct the committee and the board's attention to a number of things, we probably are going to bring it back again next month. And that's primarily because if everyone will take a look at the section on page 4 of 9 of the policy, under the heading Additional Information about Meetings of the Board, there was a problem with language. Recessing a meeting and adjourning the meeting were conflated. And we needed to parse out so that everyone understands the difference between an adjournment and a recess. And when you adjourn, you effectively end the meeting. And when you end the meeting, to have another meeting, it has to be properly advertised, there's a waiting period, etc. When you simply recess a meeting, so for example, let's say we had some severe weather, not as severe as we had on September 1st, The board could always recess the meeting and say, we're going to come back into the meeting in 30 minutes, in 45 minutes, in an hour. So we cleaned up that language with the help of our solicitor. So number 2 is completely, all of that language you'll see is now stricken. And so we have the board may at any time recess a meeting to another specified date, time, and location upon the majority of those present. When reconvened, the previously recessed meeting shall take up its business at the point in the agenda where the meeting was previously recessed. So again, if we recess, we don't have to go through re-advertising the meeting, because when we recess, we'll give the conditions of vote when we come out of recess. The other changes that we made were discussed at the last meeting. There was nothing substantive. So I'm happy to hear any feedback or any suggestions that members of the committee have. And then, like I said, next month we will come back and look at this board operating guideline again.
Thank you. Committee members, any comments or questions for Dr. Yanni at this time? Mr. Sirota?
I just want to say I appreciate the change to this item 2. It was problematic before. Now is the best time to do it. If that does mean that we need to bring it back for another second reading, I think it's important to do so. I think it's more important to get this part right than it is to get this passed. So, I like the new wording.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I think Mr. Sirota's recommendation, Dr. Yanni's recommendation is appropriate. I'd like to recommend that this, I suppose would go to legislative meeting again as a second reading, or would it not go to legislative meeting at all, even though we discussed it tonight, and be held for discussion at the next policy committee meeting?
I believe, and I'm going from memory here, that it needs to be reviewed at 2 consecutive legislative meetings. So I think it does need to go to legislative.
Well, I got something right this evening. I am so excited. Okay, so is the committee in agreement that we will take this to the legislative, next legislative for discussion? Another second, Mr. Long.
So does it go as a first reading, so it comes back next month as a second reading, or is it going as a revival? If we should do a first reading, then it goes to the legislative meeting that way, so next month it comes back as a second reading. I think that's.
I want to take it back to a first.
Yes, it'll go as a first reading on the legislative agenda, and then it'll come back next month as a second reading.
Excellent. Thank you. Good teamwork. All right. So everybody in agreement? I think. Very good. Thank you so much, everybody. The next item is policy. Thank you. 112 copy of guidance and school counseling.
So the committee will remember that the last time there are no substantive changes. We added the word social into the definition, and we also defined guidance program because that was not defined. And then we, instead of saying significantly benefit from programs, we said students would receive maximum educational benefit to be in compliance with standard language that's used from the Department of Education. But again, there were no substantive changes between the last time we reviewed this policy and this time.
All right. Any comments or questions, Mr. Sherwood?
Not new language, but Dr. Yanni, and I apologize if I asked this last month, because I might have. But in that new language for maximum educational benefit, right after that it says from the academic program. Is this enables students to receive maximum education just from the academic program? Is it really from all the programs? Or is that language straight out of code and therefore we preserve that?
Straight out of code, guidance programming is to have students benefit from the academic program, although we know it helps them in social, emotional, extracurricular, co-curricular, all of those.
Any other questions or comments from either the committee or board members? All right, seeing none, committee members, are we comfortable moving us to the legislative meeting? Thank you. Next item is 115, career and technical education.
Again, there were no substantive changes. If the board or the committee of the board will remember that we just cleaned up some language where we specifically referred to Eastern, because Eastern Center for Arts and Technology is the school through which our CTE is delivered. But again, there were no substantive changes between the last meeting and this meeting.
All right, committee members, any comments or questions? Any other members of the board? All right, I think we appreciate the work that's been done here, and I'm comfortable moving forward to legislative. Everybody is good? Excellent, thank you. And the last item for second reading, 210, use of medications.
Thank you. So if you remember, the conversation at the last meeting was we talked about asthma inhalers, and that was the only type of specific medication that was mentioned in the policy. What we did was we added a definition. No, we did not. Well, we talked about this idea of rescue medication, and so instead of calling out asthma inhalers, we put a more global term where we said any rescue medication. The reason we're reviewing this policy, when we looked at other districts' policies through the lens of how we are supporting students with rescue medication, we really did feel that we needed to have language that was a little more broad, so that we could be in compliance with board policy if we had to use those types of rescue medications. So I'm really comfortable with the way this is written now, and I think will serve our students well.
Great, I think it does address the ever-changing sort of medical landscape of medications and platforms of medications to be distributed, so thank you for that. Comments or questions from the committee? Mr. Schroeder?
Just a clarification, toward the bottom of the policy, there are two paragraphs that are marked in which they are. Normally at this point in the process, those would have been, I assume those would be struck from the version we did with.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
Dr. Biani, in the definition of medication, at the very end, you use the phrase rescue medicines, and then we have rescue medication. I'm wondering if medicine should be medication to make it consistent.
Thank you. Anybody else? Comments or questions? Committee, are we comfortable going ahead with those two minor changes and then moving this to the legislative reading? Excellent, thank you. Great, that is our second readings for this evening. Now we'll move on to our first reading. These have not yet been discussed, and we'll begin with policy 117, homebound instruction.
There are a number of things that we want to bring your attention to in this policy. So homebound instruction is really for those students that are unable to attend school. In a conversation I had via text and email earlier today with Mrs. Ionetti, we added some language to make sure that we're carrying our focus of equity through the policy. So if you look under the section of guidelines where it says homebound instruction is designed, what I'd like for it to read is homebound instruction shall be designed to be responsive to students' needs, to ensure that students' academic skill levels are maintained, period. Then we will have a number 2, and I'd like for that number 2 to say, homebound instruction will focus on the essential skills and standards for the courses in which students are enrolled. As we've been talking about reimagining instruction in the classroom, we're really always going back to what are the essential skills, what are the essential standards. And we don't want kids to come back and be completely wrong. And then that current number 2 will become number 3. That will become number 3.
And just to clarify for the community, because I think this is always a hard concept for folks, these are not parents who have chosen to have their children instructed at home.
No, these are students that, because of doctor's orders, must be educated in the home.
Thank you.
And it's typically for a defined period of time. So, so a lot of times there'll be a mobility challenge because a student has, broken a leg, or a student maybe has a mental health issue that we're working through. So it's for a very defined period of time.
Thank you. Comments and questions, Mr. Stewart, I believe? Is that anything? Thank you. Okay. Bring that closer to you.
So, yeah, I just, like Mark said, saying we say what we want is, we don't want to just come up with like, we're gonna do this for every single kid, for every single student that is coming out. So we want to make sure we are, make reasonable accommodations for these students. And then we also don't want these students to be worried about returning. So this policy makes sure that we will prepare them to return. They don't have to worry about, in high school, you lose 2 weeks of school or 3 weeks. That's our responsibility to make sure they are prepared to return.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder?
Along those lines, so in the under guidelines in that section, even as you just read it, Dr. Yanni, the word that caught my attention is maintained. And so for clarity, are we trying to maintain their current skill level, the term that it's maintaining is referring to here? Or are we trying to continue the educational process while they are at home? And I think those are two separate things. We want growth, we presumably want growth, not.
That's a good point. So let's strike that word maintain, because I don't want anyone to conflate that with just keeping the status quo. Like, the kid knows how to add 2-digit numbers, we're gonna keep them at two-digit numbers. So we'll strike that, and we'll reconfigure that language.
Skill development is what you do, so you get, like that language.
Very good. Mrs. Shapiro?
Yeah, I have a little trouble sort of making a distinction between the home instruction as I think it's intended here and maybe a virtual opportunity to join classes if that opportunity exists. So is there a way to separate those two, or do we need to separate those two?
I think we could potentially have an AR for that. I don't want to add that to the policy because I don't know that one of the reasons we didn't just live stream classes last year was we didn't want kids to be passive in their learning. And so I would never want to just have a kid join a class and not be actively engaged. So I think that also goes to Mrs. Iannicki's point where we want to be responsive to kids' needs. So if that's ultimately something that they need, we can make that happen. So we can address that in the AR.
And I think as someone who has provided students instruction at home, there are times when virtual instruction is not as effective. So this, I think, Dr. Yanni is right, gives us the flexibility to respond, whether it's virtual programming or sending folks to home. Anybody else with comments or questions on this item?
I'll just say as a side note to this, prior to the pandemic, getting teachers to do homebound instruction was incredibly difficult. So now that we're dealing with the pandemic, it's even more difficult. But even though that's difficult, I really want to give a shout out to Ashley and the kid in the HR department, because they really do go the extra mile in trying to secure staff when that's needed.
All right, seeing no other comments at this time, I would imagine that we have a few revisions. Are they substantive enough that you'd like to bring it back to first read, or would you like to move it on to second read? All right, we'll be moving this on if the committee consents to second reading. You good? All right, thank you very much. Next item, 137, home education program.
So home education, just for everyone's clarity, that might not be here at the meeting but watching, what we're talking here is a homeschool program. The state refers to it as home education. So there are a number of regulations that the district needs to follow that are articulated in this policy. In the past, our district has contracted with an outside individual to oversee our homeschooling program. We brought that back inside. So we are referring to that person as the administrator responsible for overseeing home education programs. That's coming out of Dr. Perez's office. The reason we're saying administrator responsible for overseeing, if we ever make a change and we move that to another department, we don't have to come back and revisit the policy for a title change. The other thing that we have, if you look under number 8, there are some credit requirements that are standard across districts. So when you see things like home educated students who acquire 16 district credits plus pass the GED will receive a district diploma. That's a generally accepted practice, not just among our peer districts, but really across the Commonwealth. So I don't want anyone to think that those numbers are pulled out of the air. Those numbers do have some significance.
Thank you. Committee members, any comments or questions? Anybody on the board with questions? It seems fairly straightforward, Dr. Yanni.
Just as an aside, we usually have about between 2,000 and 3,000 homeschool students every year. Most of those families choose to homeschool for religious reasons. So those students have not been in our schools, largely.
Thank you. Clarification. Dr. Yanni?
Just really wondering, with the number of students that we do have that are homeschooled, do we have many that are participating in our extracurricular or, athletic program?
Very few, and by very few, fewer than 5. Fewer than 5. We look on a case-by-case basis if there's room in a class, for example, but fewer than 5. The majority of our homeschool students have very, very strong religious rationale for homeschooling, and so they opt not to participate. We do make an effort every year, we let them know that they can participate in some things, but and we follow up with them just so that they don't get lost or they fall through the cracks. But by and large, they can.
I am glad to know that we do reach out to them to let them know that that's a possibility.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, I'd like to move this to a second read. If everyone on the committee agrees. Yes. Thank you. And our last first reading for this evening is 200 enrollment of students. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. My apologies. Me too. 138 English language development.
So, English language development program. As we take a look at this policy, the names of programs have changed over time, and recently there has been another change. So years ago we called this program ESOL, English as a Second Language. Then it became just ESL. Then it was ELL. Now it's just EL for English learners. So just as an aside, we have a number of English learners in our district, and we have two staff members that are dedicated to work with our students that are English learners. In the purpose statement, it talks about having an effective language instruction educational program. We took out the word effective and said standards aligned. We want to make sure that we are following. There actually are standards for English language instruction that we're bound to follow. And then as we look through the policy, we made sure that we are complying with standards from PDE to make sure that students ultimately get the appropriate instruction with the English language teacher, but also that they're supported in their content area classes. And when we do to support students, we typically support these students by having our English language teachers push into their content classes, science and social studies primarily, or we have another teacher that pushes in to make sure that they're supported in vocabulary-rich settings. Because for so long, English learners were removed from content. Well, when you remove them from content, they lose the richness of that content. So we want to make sure that we're exposing them to all the vocabulary that they need, all the functional language that they need to have.
Thank you. Before we start discussion, I was curious about the nomenclature that we're using because I have been doing this a long time, and you're right, the terminology continues to change and change and change. is English learners what's coming out of PD, or is it our turn?
No, it's coming out of the ED. In fact, we just received an email this afternoon about programs that are going to be audited this year, and the head from the deputy secretary was English language programs.
Okay. That being said, I just wanted to clarify what else. So thank you. Committee members, any comments or questions, Mr. Sherwood?
Dr. Yanni, could you just clarify for us, the very end of the policy says that LIAP and services to students attending private schools shall be provided as required by applicable law. To what degree are we required to, and to what degree do we provide those services?
So let me start with the second question. Right now, we're not providing services to any private or parochial schools for English language. If students reside in the district and they attend a private or parochial school and they request services, we have to provide services, just like we would for Title I reading. Typically, what we do is we don't provide the actual service. We give part of our allocation to that school so that they can provide services. The only direct services we provide outside of the district to private and parochial schools would be nursing services.
Is that request, when it comes to that request from the school or from the family?
It comes from the school.
Now, I have a question. Okay, so we're calling this LIEP, but it's really, in that case, it's not similar to an IEP.
No, it's not. No, actually, this is a regular ed initiative, even though it's called an LIEP. It's not. It's not covered under special education.
Yeah, I just want to understand a little bit better this whole idea of English language learners, because when our kids determined to be English language learners, and can parents ask to opt out of that?
So when students enroll in the district, the families complete a home language survey, and the results of those home language surveys are one of the SIFs to see if the students need services. If another language is spoken in the home, we do some diagnostic assessments. When kids come into school, even if there's nothing on that home language, if there's another language that's dominant, they go through our process, like our RTI response to intervention process, or our child study team. And at that time, if there's a concern about language, contact is made to parents and families.
Yeah, no, I think my kids all were enrolled in that when they enrolled. That was really necessary, and so I'm just concerned about the resources we're allocating for that. I mean, for the students who need it, absolutely wonderful to have and essential to have, but on the other hand, there may be people who feel that it's not necessary.
Since I've been in the district, there's been one family that I'm aware of that didn't want their student to have services. When we actually sat down, when the principal sat down with the English language teacher and explained what service delivery looked like, the family then opted to have the services. Because what this looked like 5 or 10 years ago and what it looks like now, it's very, very different. Some kids that were in ESL programs 5 or 10 years ago spent the majority of their day in ESL classes. And obviously that's not best practice, because it doesn't provide students with the opportunity to grow and learn in another language. The assessments have also become better that we have to do. We do annual assessments that determine students' language ability. And so students, I think, in our district, we're appropriately staffed in this area, and so students make good progress because they're supported inside the classroom as well as targeted instruction outside of the content area classes.
All right, that sounds good. And then my other question is related to exchange students, because I seem to remember that exchange students were automatically put in this pool as well, and I'm wondering how that's handled at this point.
So exchange students are actually not supposed to be put into our English language classes by statute. That we've been given some wiggle room over the years from the department that if students come and they really need some assistance, school districts can provide that targeted assistance. But typically, right, wrong, or indifferent, this is not a knock against companies or the processes when they send students. A lot of programs where students do become exchange students, they don't let students come if they don't have a level of proficiency in the language. But if they come and they don't have a level of proficiency, that's sufficient. We do work with them.
And then one last question, sorry to be so lengthy about this. Some of the private schools are actively attracting students from abroad. If they issue these services, I mean, does that increase our need to potentially provide these services?
So if a private or parochial school would ask for services for a foreign exchange student, we would direct them to the MCIU consortium.
If they're not an exchange student though, but for say come for a number of years,
Then if they ask for services, we would provide. But again, we don't provide the direct service. It would be part of our allocation.
but that will mean some additional costs to the district.
Yes.
I
If I could just say that the funding we get for Title III is minimal to begin with. So I don't want anyone to think that we're not getting a lot of Title III money. So even when we provide through the consortium, if we have to provide funding to another school, it's very, very, very small amounts of money.
Dr. Yanni, I was curious about whether we need, and I don't know if it would belong in the policy side or the AR side. We talk in other policies about community outreach efforts, and I think Mrs. Sherfield hit on something maybe accidentally, and it's something I've experienced where families who move in, our world is diversifying, our community is diversifying, and we are going to be seeing, I think, more families who may need to access these services, but may not know or be comfortable with asking the question. So is there something about community outreach that belongs here?
I would rather reference that in the communication policy and cross-references policy, because I think that same notion applies to any number of groups.
Okay.
So I think we can cover it, and at some point this year when we look at community outreach policy, communication policy, I will say relative to this group of students and families that we're talking about, we do have some I think is substantial outreach that's done. Not only do we work with them through the home language survey, we also have a multilingual registrar who can work with families and does work with families. Our English learner teachers are also part of their evaluation, right, from PDE, is their network, not just with families that they serve, but with the greater school community to help with that outreach piece.
Mr. Schroeder?
Just to sort of clarify that point in policy language, there is no child find requirement around yield.
No, there's no child find requirement, not yet.
My one comment, if I can continue to have that, just a question, it's not new language, but under delegation of responsibilities, second paragraph, it says the superintendent of WD shall develop and disseminate written procedures. Is that an AR? Like normally our policies say shall, has different language around shall develop an AR. But I think that's the thing.
Any other feedback? Thank you for the good discussion. If everyone is comfortable now, given that directive, we can, Dr. Yanni will help us with revisions and we can take that to second reading at our next meeting.
One more quick one, teachers point out, in that same paragraph, I was talking about shall develop and disseminate written procedures regarding the ELD program. ELD is now every term.
Yeah, I just find that for revision.
We'll do that for second. Okay, very good. Committee is good? Excellent, thank you. All right, last item tonight now, it's the last item tonight, 200 enrollment of students.
Enrollment of students, we actually have this policy will be cross-referenced with a number of other policies. The biggest thing that I want to point out to the district or to the committee and the board, under guidelines, school age resident students and eligible non-resident students, as outlined in the administrative regulation, you might be saying, why aren't we defining that? We have a whole other policy that talks about eligible non-resident students. And so when I looked at not just our policy, but I looked at our peer districts' policies, they do the same thing. So that information from another policy will go into the AR. That other policy is grounded in school code, so we don't expect changes to that. The part about parents residing in different school districts, there's nothing coming out of school code that talks about shared custody. So really, we could leave it in the policy. I have a suggestion here to move it to an AR. It really doesn't matter to me whether we keep it here or we move it to an AR. When I work on these policies, I'm really bringing this for feedback from the committee. So again, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, then, your thoughts? Mr. Sherman?
That decision is usually, for me, a question of, is this something that the board is stipulating, or is it something that the board is comfortable delegating to the administration? This does feel like a thing that that the board may wish to decide, because effectively to protect the administration, these are the kinds of discussions that can get ugly. Not necessarily for us, but discussions around this topic can get ugly, and to have something grounded in a policy that has been discussed and voted on by elected officials seems wise in that kind of scenario. I don't know that at the moment I have an opinion on what it should say, but it does feel like a thing that maybe it should be the board stipulating rather than the administration.
Any other committee thoughts on this particular item? Design Eddie?
I agree with Mark. I think that the board, this should be a board decision.
Mr. Wall, do you have any particular, you look like you're legally pondering.
To be honest with you, I'm just confused as to where we're drawing the distinction between the board and the administrative decision. In terms of whether there should be a policy at all or not, I'm just puzzled, honestly.
I'm going on, so I think you're asking, do we need language around this at all? I was sort of starting from the point where I think we do, or I was assuming that we do just because Dr. Young asked the question. But I think it's a reasonable question, do we need language around it as well? If we decide that we need language, then I'm advocating that it should be a board discussion, not the administration. And the reason why that delineation exists is because we have delegated the responsibility for managing ARs to the administration. We do not have to actually vote on the contents of ARs. And so there's this possibility that in one of these ugly discussions that the accusation is levied that we're leaving this decision up to one person, that person can change it on a whim, etc. So in order to codify it solidly, that's why I'm recommending that it be our decision, so that it is sort of set in stone, and the procedure for changing it requires the usual 2 visits to the board for a vote. But are you asking, Jeff, I think, do we need language around it at all? Am I correct? That's your underlying question.
Dr. County, is this coming out of the recommended policy?
This was language that was in our existing policy, and it's language that's in, some districts have it in policy, some districts have it in an AR. To Mr. Sirota's point, it could be contentious. Custody issues are often contentious. It does shield the administration, and it does point, if we leave this in the policy, it does provide imprint, something that we can point to say, the policy says this. If it's an AR, we don't have that same teeth.
I mean, I'm comfortable leaving it, myself. Mr. Law?
Yeah, as I think it's right, I lean toward leaving in the policy.
That's the entirety of the committee. Any other members of the board who are here have, Dr. Davis and Mr. Henderson?
Yeah, I was gonna, jump in and say, I think it's good for us to have it in the policy. Actually, when I read it, when I was, prepping for tonight's meeting, I was happy to like kind of see it there, because I know it's not in all districts. And I think that those are issues that can be difficult to handle. The policy makes it very clear. So I would certainly support, if it is moved to the legislative meeting, to have it there.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
I concur that this should stay in policy. These issues are long absolutely.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, that feels like a good discussion and a pretty good consensus. So with that committee, are we comfortable moving this forward then as a second reading as well?
Let's just ask one more question. Dr. Yang, you mentioned the other policy about eligible non-resident students, and I'm wondering for clarity, do we need something to really call that out? I mean, policy 202, as you say, really lays that out. And I worry somebody can look at just this policy in a vacuum and go, what is an eligible non-resident student? Can we tie it together?
So we can actually reference the policy by number and title in the policy.
Quick question, why is there a line about the home language survey in there? I'm just curious what the purpose is in this case. That's on page 1 towards the bottom of the third paragraph on the bottom.
Third paragraph of the guidelines.
I think every district issues a home language survey to every family that enrolls every time.
Yeah, but does that need to be in the policy on how we do enrollment students? Okay.
Yeah, it's a part of the process of enrollment, and I think it actually speaks to our ensuring that we're not missing anyone based on the last policy discussion that we had.
I was going to say, if you look at 138, there's a cross-reference that talks about student enrollment procedures, for example, home language surveys. I think it's consistent. You can vote.
That makes sense. Mrs. Strickland. Thank you. Is that anything?
Yeah, I'm looking at page 2. And, I mean, I don't know how much that we care about. Like, I don't understand how we would know that.
Which I agree.
So that's why I think
Right. Typically, I mean, unless a family brings it to our attention and we have a custody order on file, we don't know if there's a custody. Typically what happens is this will be triggered by families changing one of the addresses in Infinite Campus, and so then we ask the question. But you're right, if families don't tell us there's a custody order, we would have no idea.
So with that in mind, I feel like we should take part of that out. The part where it says you have to be residing with the parent most of the time, the one that lives in the district.
That part of it leaves in school code.
Right.
It's only the paragraph underneath, it says joint custody and time evenly divided. That's the one we're discussing, this belong in policy area. Am I correct in that, Dr. Young?
That's correct.
So if the child lives mostly with the parent out of the district, that school code would be only, okay. But the other part, that one, then we would know, but, okay.
But if things do come to our attention, now we have the capacity to stand up this policy if we prove it down.
And I was just gonna say, I mean, that will come up when there's a transportation issue for where we're gonna pick up the child and things like that. So I think having the policy makes it easier for the administration to follow through and do what they need to do.
All right, with that last exchange, everybody comfortable moving this forward to second read? Yes, good, excellent, thank you. As always, I appreciate and thank the committee and the board for participating in a good discussion, and Dr. Yanni for leading us and getting us here with your thoughtful revisions and documentation. So, next, we do have community input opportunity. Seeing as there is only one member of the community, if you'd like to come up, you're welcome. Otherwise, you can give us a thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you. A thumbs up from the audience. I will then, we did not receive any paper copy or questions submitted via online, so I will close community input. But I do thank you for your attending tonight. And next up, this next policy committee meeting will take place on Wednesday, October 6th, 2021, following the education committee meeting as it did this evening. Location, I would imagine, to be determined, but likely here. And with that, does anybody else have any comments or questions for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none, thank you all so much. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.